So thank you all for coming back. We have a little bit of a shift now, and I'm really pretty excited about this next speaker who's traveled a long way across the ocean to be with us today from the UK. You can read his extremely impressive bio on the app and in the materials that you have. I'm not going to walk you all through that. But I did want to just, highlight a few things. He's had a pretty distinguished career since 1993 in the Royal Air Force. He became the director of the CAA Airspace Policy for the UK in 2009, and then the director of Safety and Airspace Regulations. But I think what's really important to understand about Mark is that he's been a thought leader for a long time, when some of us didn't even know what performance-based meant or risk-based. He was already working on it and doing it in a way from the regulatory perspective of really and reaching out to his stakeholders, his customers in a way that we hadn't seen anywhere else on the regulatory side of aviation. He's been working that. He continues to talk to stakeholders. I think one of the first times I met with Mark was when he was reaching out even to me for input on what he was doing, and that was quite a while ago. That might have been 8 or 9 years ago. 9 years. So he's also a fellow in the UK Institute of Directors and in the Royal Aeronautical Society. So I think you're in for a treat to hear some of the progress he's been making, some of the challenges he's still facing. So I welcome Mark to the stage, and he will take questions. But this is going to be a pretty quick one. So welcome, Mark.
Okay. Hey, thank you very much indeed, Margaret, for that wonderful introduction. Good afternoon. I'm kind of 5 hours ahead of my body clock. But I'm with you in the room. So Margaret's asked me to, I'm between the networking and lunch, so it's going to be quick and dirty. Margaret has asked me to talk about some of the insights I've personally experienced taking the Safety and Airspace Group and the UK CAA towards risk-based regulation. Certainly a journey that's not finished, but what have been some of the big muscle movements on the way? What are some of the lessons that I've personally encountered and learned, and where are we going? So it's a bit of a slideshow, but there's only a couple of them, just to give you a flavor. This is a high-level overview. But then really, there's a couple of slides at the end that I think are pertinent to today, and I'm going to work a couple of things into the presentation from the themes this morning as well. But it's really the so what, so what? Why move to risk-based regulation? So this has been a long and hard journey for us. The UKCA is a pretty small organization. My kind of frontline force is 347 people to do all of the safety and all of the airspace. And the company, which is a public corporation but has no tax dollars, it all comes from the industry. It's got a budget of about $150 million per year, and we've got just under 1,000 people total. So that's the team that run safety, airspace, and economic regulation for the United Kingdom. So why try and move towards risk and performance-based transformation over the last 4 to 5 years? Simply because, and it came out this morning, if you want to do new stuff, you need to have started writing the rules 2 to 3 years ago. So you're already too late. Why do I know this? Because we spent 2.5 years writing, and we've just finished it, the regulatory framework for space, which 2.5 years worth of work, and the United Kingdom Parliament only just ratified with the Space Act 2 months ago that first stab at space within the United Kingdom. So if we stick to rules and regulations, we're not going to get very far. So what we've been doing is, and I borrowed the information savvy. I love stealing things from America because it's always rich and it's good value. If you ask a Brit what savvy means, they will look at you blankly and say, I don't know. I couldn't find a posh English equivalent to savvy, and every time I kept wondering about these 3 pillars that underpin our work, I just kept coming back to savvy. It is a fantastic American word, and that's what we want to be. And so 3 underpinning pillars of the approach We want to be data rich. That is not getting all the data in the world and trying to manage it. That's too expensive. It's too time consuming. It's harvesting the data that we already have from the industry, whether it's FDM, whether it's occurrence reporting, whatever it happens to be, and being real smart about how we use it. So one of the things that we're investing in this year are 4 big data programs, looking at machine learning, artificial intelligence. How do I get the tip of that data-rich iceberg, the stuff we're really interested in? What are the risks out there? And how do we be savvy about using that information? So savvy is a great word, and the Brits are learning it slowly. And really sitting at the tip of all of this on the safety side and on the airspace side is we want to use that information to create actionable intelligence, to do stuff for the good of the sector, to do stuff for the good of the people, and to keep the public safe without, as many speakers have said today, without compromising safety. So we move towards performance-based regulation. We want to be smart, we want to be agile, and because we all like to work in acronyms in our industry, my acronym is, for what it's worth, I offer it out there, is to be a fair regulator, FAIR, and this is the business model that I've used now for over 5 years. It's not a test. What does F stand for? Facilitate. We need to facilitate our industry. A, we need to advise. So we need to provide advice. Come on to that with innovation stuff because we have expertise that's needed. We need to inform or influence, whether that's the public or the people that need to know stuff. And one of the themes that came across loud and clear, particularly from Sean's panel, is a lot of new folk in our industry are not in the aviation club. They don't know about stuff that flies, they've just got a product that does. So we've got to inform, advise, and educate those people. And those are kind of, so that FAR, they're kind of 3 soft power options, which I think is different to the business model, and then R for regulate, where regulate is the hard power. We want to wipe out the poor performers, the ones that compromise safety, the ones that cheat, so that you guys, the good guys, have a level playing surface and can enhance shareholder value, have good customer experience, build your businesses and succeed in aviation. So, and that just happened to make fair. So we're a fair regulator. And in terms of performance-based, so what does it mean? 3 main components for us in the UK, which is kind of risk-based oversight. So build the risk picture, understand what the risk picture is. And I think it was Steve Dixon, I think, mentioned it this morning. It is all about, for the regulator, understanding what is the total aviation system risk. I think we're the owners of that concept because you guys are all competing against each other. You don't compete on safety, which is fantastic. But who's actually looking at the overall system risk in the aviation industry, being the gatekeeper of that, sharing it out with everybody else? I'll come back to that in a minute. And that's what our risk-based oversight is all about, gathering that risk picture, gobbling it all up, packaging it up, and then putting it out there. We've also started a lot of work over this last year and a half in breaking that system risk picture as best we can down into sectors. So a sector can be whatever you want. At the moment, we've got 9 of them, large commercial airlines, offshore helicopters, which has been key. We've had to keep one of the big helicopter companies grounded for 14 months, which is bad for business, bad for the people. I'm building those sector risk pictures so we can share with that particular sector our insights into their risks. And I'll come back to that again. And then an SMS. We've got our own regulatory SMS. I'm going to talk a little bit about that just for a couple of minutes. And it complements the industry SMS, but they are different. They are fundamentally different. And I'll tell you why we got that wrong a bit later on in the presentation. So data rich, information savvy, we want actionable intelligence. That is under a just culture. Just culture is not sanction free. If you're reckless, negligent, or you're totally incompetent, then just culture doesn't kind of save you in the industry, so there are sanctions. And the key features of our approach have been all about the regulator is only as good as the information that you get. And so we've been developing over the last 4 years a big investment program into an entity performance tool, and the EPT, because we like acronyms, it gathers every single scrap of quantitative and qualitative, so my inspectors' risk assessments of a company, of every single organization that we regulate. So we've got 240 airlines, there's 8 big ones and the others are pretty small, down to biz jets. We've got about 1,500 engineering companies and about 50 airfields of varying shapes and sizes. So that's kind of the picture. Every single one of those organizations is in a cloud-based software tool, and every single scrap of information about that company is in there. You can open it like a book, it's like a library, and every single inspector, every aerodrome inspector, every engineer has put their safety risk assessment and their confidence level of that organization in that tool. So we've got a pretty comprehensive picture of the industry we regulate and what we want to do about it. And the key thing is we share it. We share it with the industry. That's a big bonus. Again, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So entity performance tool, getting really detailed, good information so we can be savvy about how we use it, and then actionable intelligence. We assess the capability of every organization to manage their safety risks effectively, and we score, which is just to kind of help the inspectors, we score the safety performance against 20 facets. So the capability of the SMS, the capability of the organization, fatigue, risk, all sorts, 20 different things, all scored to give us a confidence level of the safety performance of that particular organization. But then we add them all up and we aggregate them and we break them into sectors and start looking at what's the sector risk. And perhaps one of the most interesting things we have done over the last 2 years is agree with every single accountable manager, CEO level, whoever your accountable manager is, I think the phrase is the same here, the person in charge of the shop, agree the risk picture. Year one was interesting. The regulatory assessment of a company's risk was kind of here. The CEO was kind of here. We spent the last year and a half getting about 80% match on agreed risks to safety performance across the industry. And sharing that has been key to driving success in terms of performance-based standards because it allows us to do things in a smarter way. We've broken the world up now into sectors, as you can see here, grouping safety risk information into the sectors, as I've already mentioned, and those sector risk assessments are looking at the top risks and then just getting them out there and sharing them, whether it's information to the general public, but we don't compete or compromise safety. So it's not saying that one company is less safe than another or general comparatives out there, but just telling people what the safety system is like and how it is working. And allows my teams to make more informed decisions about safety outcomes because we're joined up. And perhaps one of the most effective things we've done in terms of safety regulation over the last couple of years is to send combined teams because using the intelligence wisely and the software tools we now have available, I can send combined teams of air traffic controllers, aerodrome inspectors, engineers, and pilots all to the same company or the same aerodrome and just blitz a problem because we know what the risks are. RSMS. This was an interesting journey. You'd think you folk out in the lights out here, you've been working SMSs for years. It's how you run your business. It allows you to operate a safe business. It allows you to invest just enough to keep it safe. And it allows you to just keep the regulator off your back, which is absolutely fine. I attempted to replicate the SMS inside the company. I thought we need a regulatory SMS. You guys have all got one. Why don't we have one? Because it'd be really great to use that as the cross-channelization of our understanding of risk. We made a big mistake. For about 3 months, 3 years ago, I couldn't figure out why the regulator SMS wasn't working for anybody. We weren't getting it right. And then I had a kind of light bulb moment when I suddenly realized that the regulatory SMS was beginning to blur the boundaries of who owned the risk because we had started to muddle our role in the process. And performance-based regulation, the industry own the risks. It's our job to oversee them, but we're going to husband the overall risk picture, that system risk that was talked about earlier, and share it to make things better. So we tore it up, we started again, we put a big R in front of it because we like to do things simply, and we called it the regulatory SMS. So everybody from a foot soldier on the ground every day up to one of my senior board members, they all know that we have an important part, each and every one of us, in owning the big risk picture and sharing it, and we're part of the safety risk system with industry, but we don't own the risks, we oversee those who do. So that RSMS is now working. It's a clear and transparent governance system, and I give to our board every month a heat map risk picture of the top sector and industry risks affecting aviation in the UK and globally. And interestingly now, we're just seeing those risks starting to slide on and off the heat map as industry manage them away. So for me, that's a measure of success. And it shows to me, as we look at the 20 disciplines and you share those with accountable managers and they go, crikey, compared to the industry average, I'm below, they invest, they sort it. The organizational performance is moving up, and the ability to perform to a standard that allows everybody to have a level playing field is greatly improved by this approach. And then, of course, we're working very closely with the European Safety Agency in order to advance this sort of thinking. And so what? So what? Why do all this? Because if we had to write rules and regulations to do all the stuff that everybody wants to do that we've been hearing about this morning, we're already way behind the drag curve. We're never going to catch up. I'll give you one example, which is just this one, very briefly. This is ADSB. It's an American startup who came over with the Sky Echo 2 to the UK and said, here, you've been asking for this for several years. It is my ambition, and publicly stated, in the United Kingdom that within 5 years, everything that doesn't possess a set of feathers will have an electronic ID device fitted to it if it flies. That's what we're going to do. That will enable us, using performance-based regulation and standards, to move the airspace classification to probably just 2. You know, the controlled airspace, Class A through C, is kind of one standard. And the rest is probably going to be something like Class E plus electronic ID. That's where we want to get to. What we've done with this, I was interested to hear the standards conversation just a minute ago. Nobody wants to compromise safety, least of all me. But we wrote that document in 3 weeks. It's very simple. We're going to design and build the standard using performance-based targets as the need for better data integrity, and as the trials, we've been running 6 electronic conspicuity, try saying that when you've had a few beers, 6 electronic ID trials in the UK over the last 6 months. So we're doing live trials, all working together, and the product has had 2 iterations. It's mainly for general aviation, so you know the risk appetite for general aviation is different to the risk appetite for large commercial aviation for obvious reasons. So it's a tailored and scalable approach. And what we did is we wrote 2 standards, one for the chipset, one for the safety impact level, put a performance piece in there. It's only about 8 pages long, and you can self-attest to it. So any manufacturer who wants to make this product just signs up to it, punches it out, and fits it. And that's what we've been doing. That's a very flexible, performance-based approach. Clearly, we're keeping a very close eye on it, and we're watching the risk all the time. What's the risk? What's the risk? What's the risk? And there are risk trade-offs. We're looking at the spectrum issues. We're looking at the hue. We had 2 sadly fatal, many people died, GA on GA mid-air collisions last year. This is helping de-risk this sort of thing. So these trials are ongoing, and we intend to design and build out by increasing the performance spec and therefore the standard related to it as the product gets better and better. And eventually it will be a safety impact level of X and a chipset standard of Y, and that'll be the performance-based standard that we will then police to build this capability across the UK. Just in terms of costs, 5 years ago when we tried this, one of the German companies, the cost to buy the equipment, the cost of regulatory approval, certification, and fitment was $4,000 to $6,000 US. The cost of this is not an advert for this product, many other products are available, but the cost of this piece of equipment is around about $500 in US money. There are no regulatory costs whatsoever. So we just got rid of them all. So you can just buy this and fit it. And we put real-time Met information into the iPad as well from the Met office. So en route in the UK, where weather's a big factor, unlike here, you just get free Met for your navigation. So that's encouraging equipment as well. So that's one of the so what's, and just one small example. But the other one, and it was touched on earlier today, is we don't want to use data and lots of data to make more rules. It's just not going to work. So I stole your word savvy. I stole some of NASA's stuff, which is the TRLs, which many of you in the room will be familiar with. Technology readiness levels 1 to 9. And again, we like our acronyms. We are going to use performance-based regulation, a comprehensive understanding of risk in order to, and we're just setting this up at the moment, we're going to match our regulatory function, because we got that function under FAIR that I mentioned earlier, but there's another acronym, AA&A, to anticipate, adapt, and advise from the regulatory point of view so that products can come to market in a smart and agile way from those not in the aviation club, and we can help. We see that as a significant role for the future. So we're just doing this at the moment. We aim to set up a reg lab for 1 to 3, kind of an industry-owned sandbox where you can come and play. And Sean Cassidy, who's doing work with Prime Air over with us in the UK, is kind of in that second box there at the moment. He just doesn't know it, and I didn't until just earlier. And then in terms of business as usual, smart performance-based rules and regulations with a workforce that understands risk and starts with a conversation, what's the risk? How do we join it up? How do we sectorize it? How do we own that system risk and make sure it's just safe enough? That's what we want to do. So that's the so what. 44 seconds, okay. I'm done.
Probably just switch the other one on. Thank you. So anyway, thank you very much. I'm not sure if we have questions yet. One of my questions is a lot of what you've done over the years is working closely with your stakeholders, potentially with those over which you set regulations. So
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you get over any sort of conflicts that
Sure.
that could create?
Yeah, air traffic's a good one. As you know, in the UK, the ANSP is privatized but regulated by us as a regulated monopoly. But for many of the airspace changes, and they're replacing the national airspace system over the next 5 to 10 years, our folk in that. We ended up codifying it. So we have 3 levels of engagement with the ANSP to avoid conflicts of interest. Level 1 is just that kind of hard regulator. You build, you do, you present, we assess, we approve, we decide. Down to level 3, and level 3 worked in that ADSB trials we've been doing, where we throw aside all of our armor and we work with the ANSP and with the industry stakeholders as a normal, average, standard stakeholder contributing our expertise, and we label it. And we've got a charter, it's only 2 pages long, and you're either in bucket 1, bucket 2, or bucket 3. If my guys and girls are in bucket 3, then in terms of the conflict, we will make sure they never come near the regulatory approval process. So they are kept separate for the lifetime of a trial or a product, such that the decision-making there's clear blue water between the decision-making and the involvement. So that's one of the major, and we codified it, and it works pretty well. Yeah.
Last chance for some questions. Do we have one over here?
Or
sure.
Lunch. So, yeah. Just shout.
This may be a little bit down in the weeds, but in talking about something like Sky Echo,
Yeah.
so basically we don't impose any regulation or standard on that. What we really want is the ID and the capability on the aircraft. I'm thinking about some of the very foundational documents that organizations like RTCA have out there. Things like DO-178, DO-254, that tend to be pretty...
That's software and hardware standards.
Yeah.
Tend to be very prescriptive
Yeah.
on process, but which new entries into our space, like the EV toll market that wants to work in urban mobility. They're trying to leverage automotive type standards, where a lot of this stuff is not considered important. The process is not important. The final technical performance is important.
Sure.
So can you talk a little bit about how you have approached, I'll say, lightening the focus on things like software and hardware, low-level prescriptive standards?
Yeah. So we haven't lightened the focus on this. Sorry, it's a bit down in the weeds, but you know the SIL level, the safety impact levels are 1 to 5. So we originally regulated this to SIL 0, but these are field trials still, so they're not across the whole of the country. And the chipset is certified to, I don't know if it's one of your standards, but it is a certified aviation chipset that sits in the Sky Echo. It is, so the regulatory standards are there, both in terms of the safety impact level and the chipset standard. And currently, the ability of general aviation to operate with Sky Echo 2 is under a trials basis and exemption. And the intention is, if the product gets GA take-up and grows in the general aviation space, we will increase the safety standard either by increasing the safety impact level, which is a proven standard over many years, plus the chipset data standard, and then get it certified. So working with the European Safety Agency to then get it certified to an agreed standard that everybody can use, either in Class G airspace, less risk, cheap and cheerful, use it, or if it becomes part of a national surveillance integration program, you can see some of these products, if general aviation want to fly in controlled airspace with full surveillance capability, they would have to have the equivalent of a Mode S transponder. So it is a question of doing that thorough assessment using the standards base that is already out there, not just kind of throwing it in and saying, play with it, that'll be fine. Totally get the point about other industries. We found this in the spectrum industry in particular with spectrum sharing, particularly aviation sharing. It is very easy for those not in the aviation club to say, we'll have some of that, thank you very much, and because the risk is so low over here, we'll just use it in this way. Actually, when it starts clipping your DME, and they don't even know what DME stands for, it's a different conversation. Absolutely get the point. We're very alert to that. So it's not about a dilution or a lightening of standards and approach. It is a combination of understanding the sector risk and what safe enough means, but sticking to the tried and tested standards, using them, but writing the book in a way that's smart and agile without losing the underpinning standards that some good folk have already done for
And I'm
us.
afraid on that note,
Yep.
we're going to have to start our transition. But I really would like everyone to join me in a round of applause for Mark coming all the way over to talk to us. Thank you.